Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson today. We're listening to Unusual Suspects, and this is Burned.
The reason I brought you in today, I just wanted to ask you a few questions.
Casey brings the security guard in for questioning.
Why were you at this store?
I was just there looking for some work because a couple of friends of mine said there was a good place around the building to just hand out my resume.
In interviewing people, you just some reason you just know, this guy came across really innocent, really honest, and I really felt like he was trying to solicit business.
All right, good luck.
Casey is running out of leads. He has only one piece of evidence left: a dark smudge on the fire starting device found at the Craft Mart store. I thought I had a fingerprint on the cigarette butt, so I sent it away to the lab. And when it came back, there wasn't a print on the cigarette butt. They said that wasn't a print, that was something else. He said, hey, we do have a print, though. The print was on the yellow line paper. I said, you gotta be kidding me. This looks like the key to finally putting a name to the suspect. Casey sends the print to the state automated system with high hopes.
Was really in the early stages back in the late 80s in California, and it came back with no match, which could mean that the suspect was never arrested before, or was never arrested in California because they're limited to the state of California.
No closer to identifying the suspect, Casey does more digging. He comes up with a disturbing theory. The arsonist might be one of their own. This would take somebody very, very bold, somebody that knew the problem, somebody that knew how to do it, and what more person that knows how to do it, than a fire investigator or a firefighter. Will Casey's theory be true? Could his arsonist be the most unusual suspect of all? A series of fires in Central California has arson investigator Marvin Casey on the hunt for a suspect. But the evidence begins to point to someone who knows fires, how to set them, and where to set them. No one knows that better than firefighters. It's a troubling theory, but maybe not so far-fetched. At the very moment the latest fire spree starts, more than 200 arson specialists are in town at a conference. The question has to be asked: could the arsonist be one of them? There's too much coincidence. The proximity of it and the time frame of the convention. He calls all the local investigators together. I shared with them my theory.
I see a pattern developing, and they were all at the conference.
There was 3 fires in your area at the same time the convention was going on, and so could this possibly be a firefighter or an investigator attending the conference? They said, oh, we wouldn't want to think that. Casey doesn't want to believe it either. The theory of firemen setting fires is unpopular, but I think that it had to be eliminated. And that was what I was going to do. But Casey can't eliminate it. The theory won't leave him alone. Casey goes back over what he knows. The first 3 fires started in Fresno during the arson conference. After the conference, they were followed by 4 more on a path headed directly south. The guy had to live south of Bakersfield, and he attended the conference. Reluctantly, he makes a list of possible suspects. To make Casey's list, the arsonist also had to be traveling alone. Arson's a very secretive crime, and I don't think that they would share it with someone else. It's a loner crime. Who matched Casey's criteria? 242 people attended the conference. I picked up 55 names. That was a lot of names. Every possible suspect on his list is a major name in firefighting circles. Casey wants to check his best evidence: the fingerprint found on the fire starting device at the Craft Mart store. Against that list, he goes back over to his contact at the fingerprint database. I put together about 55 names, and he said, well, Marvin, that's just a little too many, for us to work and try to get fingerprint cards from all the different agencies that these guys work for. I said, well, okay, I understand that. Fingerprints weren't on computers in those days, so these would have to be done all manually. And so then, at that point, it just got put on the back burner. But when a new series of arson fires suddenly erupts on the California coast, Casey's theory takes on a whole new life. Fires break out in Morro Bay, Salinas, Tuscadero, and San Luis Obispo. 7 fires. All start by igniting foam rubber products, the same MO as the Fresno fires.
And like the Fresno fires, an arson conference just happens to be in session. A Fresno investigator who attends the conference alerts Casey to the new series of fires on the Central Coast.
This is going to knock your socks off. He says, this is just so similar to the ones that you're working on now. And I said, really?
Perhaps these new fires will produce the evidence Casey needs to prove that the nameless, faceless arsonist was one of the people on his list of 55, that the arsonist might be one of their own.
He got me the copies of the reports. I said, hey, give me a copy of the roster of the symposium. I took it and I cross-referenced it with my 55 names. And now I've got this narrowed down to 10.
Once again, Casey calls the fingerprint examiner. With fewer names on his list, he is sure he can get fingerprint runs on each of them.
He took the 10 names, got the fingerprint cards from the other agencies, and then compared them. It come back with negative results, no match. So at this time, I had no more suspects. I had no more names. I had no other place to go. It was over as far as I was concerned.
The firebug's trail goes completely cold. Casey has evidence and a theory, but no way to prove it. 4 years go by. It's 1991, and Casey gets a call from the ATF task force investigating the Los Angeles fires 200 miles away.
They were having problems, in foam rubber bands and stuff like that. They shared with me what they had, and I was sharing with them what I had.
When they compared notes, they realized that the craft art store is exactly like the ones the arsonist is using in Los Angeles.
We're convinced that the same person or persons were responsible for all of the fires.
And Casey still has something the ATF task force doesn't have, a potential case cracker.
I said, I got a print on one of mine. He said, wow, we didn't know you had that evidence.
The fingerprint had come up blank twice. Now it gets a third run.
And the theory was maybe we'll get lucky and the person has been arrested since we ran it the last time.
Brought it back to Los Angeles and submitted it to the LA County Sheriff's Laboratory in downtown Los Angeles. They had a positive match on the print, and we were just stunned. We couldn't believe it. This is a huge bombshell.
Finally, investigators have identified the fingerprint of the suspect, and nobody wants to believe who it is. For more than a decade, a serial arsonist in California has escaped all efforts to catch him. Then, in 1991, the chase takes a shocking turn. A fingerprint recovered years before by investigator Marvin Casey is finally matched. It belongs to one of the last people anyone would suspect.
The Sheriff's Department supplements the statewide system by putting in fingerprint cards of all sworn law enforcement personnel. A couple days later, we get a phone call from the Sheriff's Department, and they say, we got a print. And I said, you do?
They have the match, but investigators are wholly unprepared to learn what that match reveals. It's someone they know.
And he says, John Orr says, tell him to stop handling it for your evidence. And I was like, what? And he says, are you absolutely sure? And he says, there's no doubt about it.
John Orr is a well-respected Glendale fire captain and arson investigator, known throughout law enforcement. Investigators are stunned.
I was just absolutely amazed. I could not believe it.
The first reaction is that it's not possible. A 17-year veteran of the Glendale force, John Orr is the most unusual suspect anyone could imagine.
John Orr had an outstanding reputation as an investigator because his ability to determine cause and origin.
He wrote for national journals as pertaining to serial arsonists, and he put on seminars and training in Glendale.
He's my instructor that taught me fire investigation. He got me state certified.
This is the same John Orr who believed the Ole's fire was bungled and pointed investigators toward foam rubber as the point of origin. There must be a mistake.
We knew it was his print. We had physical evidence to support that. But we were hoping that somehow he came in contact with that device in a legitimate manner.
Was John Orr somehow involved in Casey's investigation? That would legitimately explain the presence of his fingerprint on the evidence.
Captain Casey very much assured us that that did not, in fact, happen, and he wouldn't have let him come anywhere in contact with the physical evidence or his fire scene.
Now there's only one way Orr's print could be on the evidence. Could he be the serial arsonist?
I remember, wow, this was awful. You know what I mean? It's like the only way I can describe it is just the hair went up on the back of my neck. I went, wow.
The news hit hard for all Orr's colleagues.
Devastated.
Stunned.
Shocked.
When investigators look at Orr as a ruthless arsonist rather than a respected and trusted colleague, past events look far more sinister. Mike Matassa remembers a brush fire where Orr had shown up to try and pin down the cause of the blaze.
And John arrives and surveys the scene a little bit, and there's a photograph where he's pointing in a typical V pattern of an arson, and points down and says the fire started right here, and finds a device, and just shocked everybody that he was so good. He probably knew exactly where it was at because he had put it there.
At the scene of the 1990 College Hills fire, John Orr talked to the press about the psychology of an arsonist.
Just gets an attention getting or gets a sexual gratification from watching the fire and gaining an inadvertent attention from being in the crowd and the only one that knows how the fire started. He gathers attention from that. It's a very weak individual generally.
Even then, Orr's behavior took some fire officials by surprise. He was out of uniform, wearing civilian clothes and sunglasses.
And all these are PR no-nos. When you're doing a press conference, you have your department's name. You never wear sunglasses because you want to have the eye contact with the people so you can see your honesty and what you're talking about.
But now Orr's behavior made sense. A woman had reported seeing a suspicious man at the scene, dressed in blue.
My thoughts were is that John tried to disguise himself so that the woman would not recognize him.
On another occasion, John Orr committed the ultimate sin, telling reporters exactly what kind of fire-starting device was involved.
The reason why we never describe the device is that if that device is used later on another fire, we can tie them together and say, this is the device that's used on all these incidents. But once he announced what the device was, anybody can make it, and you've got a copycat. You can never tie them together, and somebody's got a defense.
New explanations for old mysteries continue to surface.
So he came in, he was wearing that purple cowboy western shirt. Guy.
Like the cowboy a female witness reported seeing during the 1987 Bakersfield fire. Suspect John Orr fit the description.
She probably did see John come in the store, since he did kind of dress Western with Levi's and boots and stuff. So she did make a good witness.
Then there was the light blue undercover police car. A witness reported seeing it during the carport fires. Investigators could never track it down. Now that they understand who, they understand why.
Yeah, I had a fire up in my city and contacted John Orr at that time, and he came out to the scene to help me out on this investigation. And I noticed that when he pulled up, his vehicle was recently painted, but it didn't dawn on me that his car used to be light blue.
John Orr often went to fires even when he didn't have to.
I was aware of John showing up at fires. My first experience with that was at the Mort's fire. On my arrival, John was there videotaping the fire. The peculiar thing about that was that John was there, according to the videotape, prior to the arrival of the fire department.
There was no phone activity from his office. He was never in court. He was never on vacation. Oftentimes he would be listed.
They didn't even work in his department or anything else, but he gave this excuse that, I have to be in the neighborhood, or I heard it on the radio, or I heard it on the scanner.
It looked like Orr was playing cat and mouse, setting fires right under the noses of the other arson investigators.
They had surveillance, and John's on the radio with them, and they say, okay, it looks like we're clear here. Let's move over here. And as soon as they go over here, a fire break out here.
I believe John Orr has a large ego, and that it was all about, I'm smarter than you. I know how it started. You don't. You can't figure it out.
Or it may even have been